Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Careers at the End of the World. It's me, Jenn Walker Wall, your host and founder of Work Wonders Careers. And I am back after a summer sabbatical with thoughts on the job market, thoughts on how to help mission-driven professionals navigate this, if I may say so, particularly freaking unpleasant period, and to help you get your career back on track. So welcome back. For those of you who are longtime listeners, thanks for coming back. For folks who are new listeners, thrilled to have you. I took some time off this summer, but also I regrouped. I have sort of reshuffled things and reprioritized things, and I'm really glad to be back, and I'm glad to be making these episodes. I have a few episodes planned. We're going to go every couple of weeks going into the end of the year, around some holidays, of course. As you may recall, I decided early this year, to double down on the podcast because this is a great way to get free, strategic insight out to the masses. And I think that's really what people need right now. So I hope you'll stay tuned. I hope you'll subscribe if you're not subscribed already, because we have some really great episodes coming your way. Before we get too far into today's topic, which I'm very excited to discuss in detail because I feel like I've skirted around it a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit today about, do you need a job to earn an income? And maybe a slightly different question of, what would it look like if you could earn income without a job? So I want to share a little bit about that, not because I don't think anyone can get a job, but because certainly I know it's taking longer for people to get jobs. And I want people to have options. I think of these things as like levers to pull, right? And sometimes we pull the job lever and sometimes we pull another lever. And I want to offer another lever today, somewhere in the realm of outside the 9 to 5, outside a really corporate in-house salaried role, which probably most of my clients are familiar with. But like I said, before we get too far, a couple of updates on my end. I'm particularly proud of myself for booking my events through January 2026. I know I'm not usually quite on the ball, but that's what the sabbatical and the reset was for. So if you go to workwonderscareers.com, you can check out our events tab, and then you will see that we have 3 events between now and January 2026. The first one that's coming up is Revive Your Job Search, which is an interactive paid workshop where I will be helping people assess their progress, identify new opportunities, and double down on some, I'm going to say, different kinds of effort. I think some people will be straight up job searching, but I think we're going to be spending a little bit more time talking about self-employment, portfolio style careers, and helping people think more broadly outside of a job as well. And we'll also talk a little bit about pivots to make. You've probably heard me say, and you've probably heard others say, it's not an easy time to pivot. And that is true. My first choice would be to not pivot in a market quite like this. However, I do think that we are in a period where some people don't have a choice but to consider pivoting. I'm thinking of federal workers. I'm thinking of scientists. I'm thinking of people broadly in, USA, AID people, right? Like there's a lot of people who probably need to think about taking their skills into another type of industry. And I don't think it's impossible. I do think it's hard, but guess what? Everything's hard. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that. And our next podcast episode after today, that's coming out 2 weeks from today, will be about pivoting at the end of the world. Okay. So I want to talk about the hard things up front, whether that's striking out on your own or going down a new path in a new industry that you may not be super familiar with or even comfortable doing. That's how I want to kick off this fall. Our Revive Your Job Search workshop is I'm using the term job search really broadly so that we can just think about what's next for you and what you need to do to get there. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A. There will be structure. There will be exercises. It will be interactive. And I just think it's going to be a good way to truly revive your efforts for this fall. Those tickets are just $47, and I will link to them in the show notes so that you can go ahead and grab yours. If you are a former client of mine, if you have worked with me one-on-one, or if you have been a part of our job search community previously, I would love to comp you a ticket. So please send me an email and I will send you a discount code. If you are in our job search community, do not buy a ticket. This is included in your job search community access. Those folks don't need to purchase tickets. So just get in touch with me and I will help you join us on September 30th. I don't think you're going to want to miss this. I think you're going to want to be part of a solid, kind, thoughtful, mission-driven group of folks. You're going to have some built-in networking. You're going to have a chance to get some feedback on what you've done, make sense of the data that you're seeing, and put together some next steps. I will be sharing what's working for people so that you can stay the course or make some adjustments and hopefully get moving in the right direction this fall. I'm also happy to share that our signature workshop, How to Job Search at the End of the World, is now available on demand, and I have a discount code to make it free to purchase and view between now and September 25th. So if you haven't seen How to Job Search at the End of the World, or if you have seen it and you could use a boost, you could use a replay, please come on over to workwonderscareers.com. And you can check it out. I'm going to link to it right on the homepage with the discount code. I'll also put the link and the discount code in the show notes so that you can go ahead and access that, because I think this is something people are going to want. It's going to help provide some structure. It's going to help provide some guidance, share some insight on our job search framework, what's working, what we're thinking about differently. So it's really like, job search 101 at the end of the world. Okay. And revive your job search is like job search 201 at the end of the world. So I would recommend getting the workshop, How to Job Search at the End of the World, for free, and then joining us for Revive Your Job Search later in September so that you can get some feedback, ask some questions, and have some interaction as part of your overall experience. I think people really benefit from hearing other people's challenges, hearing other people's questions, learning, building your network in an organic way among kind, thoughtful people who want to be helpful and useful to other folks in their process as well. I'm really looking forward to these things. Please feel free to share the link, the discount code that's in my signature. I want people to take advantage of this, and it's just through September 25th. So we've only got a few weeks for people to get their free download of this workshop. Now, today, I want to talk about how to earn an income without a job. And again, I'm not offering this perspective because I think people can't get jobs. That's not consistent with what I'm seeing, but it is taking longer for people to get jobs. And many industries are cutting back, having a difficult time making hires at all. I want to look at job adjacent opportunities that I think could help create some income, help create some structure, help create some opportunity and momentum for your professional life. This funny thing has happened in the last 18 months or so, which is that a lot of people who have been self-employed have come to me looking for jobs because business has been really difficult. And then people who've had jobs and lose jobs realize how tight the market is and come and want help setting up some kind of self-employment structure and having their own business or service to sell and promote. So it's sort of like these two different populations are almost trying to switch sides. I think everyone's looking for something that is stable. I can tell you, as a person who's had jobs and who's had businesses, that I don't know that I can say either one of these is going to be easy or stable long term. But I think what we want to be doing is thinking more creatively about how we can work. And for those of you who have, had jobs in the most traditional sense, this world of portfolio careers or side hustles or consulting or fractional work might look really mysterious. Almost everyone who has a business has had a job. That part's probably less mysterious. Now, there's some tactical things to think about, but not everyone who's had a job has had a business, right? I wanted to share a little bit about what do these opportunities look like? Because I think there's a real spectrum that are worth considering. How do we know where we should think about starting on the spectrum? How do we know what we should be selling or promoting or trying to do if we create this kind of vehicle for ourselves? And how do we take action? How do we manage our expectations? Because it's unlikely that this will be a silver bullet for most of you. I think most people running businesses these days will be like, yeah, there's no silver bullet. So what we want to do instead is really think about giving you some options, giving you different ways to earn an income and structure your time and be engaged in this process so that you don't feel like you are at the mercy of the job market, which, who doesn't feel that way right now? I think we all feel that way right now. Even if we weren't in the midst of this sort of upheaval that this new administration has brought us, there's always people who are curious about doing something outside of a job. So this isn't new per se. People have been coming for years looking for this kind of support. But I think there is a very strong renewed interest in this kind of work, and for many reasons, right? I think, for many of our clients who navigate burnout or care work, having a vehicle to make money without a full-time in-house job can help keep someone's one foot in, one foot out of the working world, which can be helpful in terms of producing income and just structure and keeping, for many people, a strong sense of themselves. Some people just are in a season where they want or need flexibility, whether that's just they're tired of the corporate grind, tired of the burnout. So let me just share with you what I think is on this spectrum of non-full-time in-house corporate work. I think on one hand, you have people who have businesses. You have people who are fully self-employed, doing their own thing. This is obviously the strongest end of the spectrum on the business and self-employment side. People might have a business like me, although I don't actually consider myself fully on this end of the spectrum. I'll get to where I think I stand. But this is for people who kind of go all in, sometimes on purpose and sometimes running out of other ideas or alternatives, right? This would be someone who is driving their own income through their business, or sometimes the business model varies. Could be someone doing something more like a freelancer, but their full-time income comes from what they can generate on their own. And then you might have something, I'm going to back up a couple steps. This is kind of where I plant myself, which is as a portfolio careerist, right? Someone who's doing multiple things simultaneously. And I have been in this camp for basically as long as I've been working. I feel like I've always wanted to do a lot of things, but not necessarily move up a traditional ladder. Like moving up a traditional ladder never looked that appealing because I would move further and further away from the substance of work that I wanted to do, right? So I like the portfolio career piece because it allows me to manage my income and increase my income by creating other vehicles to earn an income. So sometimes a full-time job is part of this. Sometimes a part-time job is part of this. Sometimes temporary contract or consulting work is part of this. I've been an adjunct instructor. That's another avenue to get paid. Obviously, I have the business. So there's a lot of ways to think about a portfolio career, and the pieces of the portfolio can vary over time. Some people keep the same things over time, and that works for them. I like to change things up. So that's sort of where I stand. I'm not someone who really runs around and considers themselves an entrepreneur. That requires a level of commitment and enthusiasm that I'm not sure I really have just for the sake of owning a business. I like to do interesting things personally. That's what drives me. And I like a lot of autonomy. So that's why the portfolio career has worked out well for me. I get to wear a lot of hats. I get to wear them more or less at my own discretion. And I get to sort of plug in ways that are interesting and compelling for me. You might also see something like people doing contract work. This could be its own spectrum. This could be temporary. This could be long-term. I've seen people come in and serve fully as interim professionals. Like they come into a lot of organizations and just take over for 3, 6, 9, 12 months, whatever it is. Maybe they're covering a leave. Maybe it's a nonprofit organization that needs to do a search for an executive director. So there are people who come in as professional interim leaders, right? And that's just one example of contract work, but I think it's a super interesting one. And then there's just project-based work. This could be a very short-term type of thing. It could be seasonal. You're probably not paid as a full-time in-house. It's probably 1099 style work, but maybe not. I'm not trying to paint with too broad of a brushstroke here. And I think that this can be really helpful because the mindset of people who either take or pursue contract work makes a lot of sense for this market because you really don't take much for granted. You know that there's an end date. We tend not to think about an end date with jobs. We kind of assume they'll be there till we want to leave, which a lot of people are being reminded that that's just obviously not the case. So there's something about the contract work that can keep you on your toes. And I think that's why people avoid it. But we've seen people, or at least I've seen people, get a new job and get laid off 4 months later, which kind of puts a 6-month or 12-month contract into perspective, right? I mean, contracts can get canceled. There's no doubt about that. So it's just another way to think about work, and I've seen it work for people who are, maybe coming back from some kind of work break, some kind of leave. It can be a difficult thing if you are looking for benefits, but sometimes there are benefits attached to contract work. So you're going to have to kind of research these and figure out the details and the nuance of each one, because sometimes these are really robust and high paying and benefited jobs, and sometimes they're not at all. So you want to pay attention to that. And then you might have something like a side hustle. Now, a side hustle could be part of a portfolio style career, but it also could just be something that you have historically done on the side, like working at your favorite retail store during the holidays, or, I have some colleagues who review admissions material during college admissions season, or just things like that, right? And there's, again, a whole spectrum of side hustle opportunities. I mean, it could be something that looks a lot like self-employment in a small capacity, like a part-time sort of side hustle situation. But sometimes it looks like leveraging these platforms, these gig work platforms, which I'm not endorsing because I think we all know they're pretty exploitative, but also they provide a vehicle sometimes. One place I've seen clients be very successful is in the pet sitting app realm. I've seen multiple folks be very successful in growing their client base and earning a pretty good side income while pet sitting or even while house sitting. So those are the things that I typically see. And I think they're all really valuable levers to consider pulling at various points. I'm using the term lever intentionally here because this is how I sort of want people to consider thinking about these work opportunities. Many people are socialized very much around the job with healthcare, the job with PTO, the job with the great salary. And honestly, same. Like I see the value of that. The challenge, I think, is that those are hard to get these days, not impossible, hard to get. And I think we're seeing a lot of very flexible work opportunities look more like they did pre-2020, which doesn't really work for a lot of people, depending on the season of life they're in or general attitude towards on-site work. And I want you to start thinking, if you are looking for a job, would it be helpful to pull any of these levers? I think the obvious reason to pull a lever is to create some income or the potential for income, right? But also the structure, not having to spend 40 hours of your week waiting for jobs, trying to network, but to have 10 or 15 hours worth of something to do that keeps you busy, I think from a mental and emotional and practical standpoint could be really, really, really beneficial for people who are looking for their next role. So I don't think these are just about income. I think it's how we spend our time. One really big challenge I've seen is people feeling like they're just not doing enough because the market's so slow and the job postings are few and far between. People can spend a lot of time feeling like, what should I be doing right now? And working in some capacity can be a really good way to spend your time. So if you are struggling with overwhelm, struggling to feel like you're doing enough, consider some other kind of work in your schedule, because it could help break up your schedule a little bit, give you a little bit more structure, give you some more momentum when you're actually actively job searching. And also, I think most importantly, give you permission to not be actively job searching constantly, because that's just no way to manage this process. Now, you might be wondering, how do I even get started doing something like this? Now, if you want a part-time job at your favorite retail store, if you want to sign up on a pet sitting app and see what's possible, that's a pretty straightforward pathway. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about that today. You know how to get a retail job. And I'm not saying they're necessarily super easy to get right now either, but you know the process. You've probably done it before. So what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about is what if you are initiating your own vehicle for work, your own way of making money? So whether this is a full-time business, a freelance venture, a part of your portfolio, or some kind of side hustle, let's talk a little bit about what it's like to actually get some money doing work like that. The first way to think about doing work like this is to turn a job into a client, okay? Now, you've probably heard stories of people who are job searching, right? They're interviewing, their resume worked for them, and then all of a sudden the job gets pulled because the budgets are frozen. There are some clients who would be really well suited to take a rejection like that, which has nothing to do with their candidacy, and everything to do with the resources that are available within the organization, and to make a pitch to do some kind of contract or consulting or freelance work instead. When clients do go and they create some kind of vehicle or take ownership over what's possible for them, they can take a no and turn it into a potential consulting opportunity. Basically, it becomes kind of a sales opportunity. You're able to navigate these like peaks and valleys of people's resources, organizational resources, with more than just a job. If we're asking for a job and there's no job, or there's no jobs for 6 months, there's a hiring freeze for 6 months, that doesn't mean the work stops, and it doesn't mean there's zero resources. It means they don't have the money for a full-time in-house person, which is the most expensive kind of labor, right? So being able to say to a hiring manager or even a recruiter, I completely understand, sorry to hear there's resource issues, but I would be willing to do this on a contract basis at an hourly rate or a project-based rate. Please let me know if that's of interest. What we've done is we've taken a brick wall and turned it into a doorway, right? We turn it into a windows. That's what we're trying to do here is when we run into some kind of obstacle is we figure out what other opportunity is left here. I've even seen people get laid off and go back to their former employer to do something like this. So that's the first thing I would say is whether it's your last employer, previous employers, potential employers, if the job piece doesn't work out, is there any other kind of work opportunity that you can pursue? The second thing I'll say is that contract work is sometimes posted just like a full-time in-house job. So pay attention when you are looking for jobs. You might actually just come across those kinds of jobs. Same with part-time jobs, although there's not a ton of like really good high-quality part-time roles, but they can be posted just like other jobs. So if that's of interest to you, I would take a look at that. I would make sure you've set your search parameters wherever you're looking for roles to incorporate things that maybe aren't just full-time, that aren't just in-house, right? Because that can make that can be income for you. That can be work for you. Another thing that I think is very useful here, especially if this is the first time that you're doing this, is to think about this being an experiment or a pilot project so that you don't have to make things perfect. If I could go back, 12 years ago when I was starting Work Wonders Careers, there are so many things I would do different. I would not spend 5 months working on a secret website trying to perfect the language. I would be putting myself out there looking for clients, trying to generate revenue, right? I think things like finessing your LinkedIn profile, coming up with the perfect website copy, those are great, but they're only really helpful once you have clients and traffic to your website. I would like to encourage you to think about an experiment. Can I get one client or one project under my belt? And if so, what skills do I have that would be most useful in turning into some kind of offer or service like that? I like to ask what's easiest. What's the lowest lift? That's just me. I like to make things as easy as possible. This is also an opportunity if you've always wanted to start some specific kind of business, obviously, go for it. Don't turn it into an experiment. Jump in with both feet. But I think really what I see is people trying to make things perfect before they've even had a client. And I want to discourage that, especially because in this instance, I think we're really talking about generating income in the short term. I would think like, okay, what can I do that I'm really good at? Well, I'm really good at writing resumes, right? So let me put together a one-pager that lets people know what I'm available for, what my background is, and how to reach me. Maybe I'd write this in Google Docs. I'd probably update my LinkedIn profile with it. And then I'd start sending it to some friends like, hey, do you know anyone looking for a job who needs some help with their resume? You can fill in the blank with any service you want. My business is very B2C, but yours might not be. If you're a writer or a marketer, you have a more B2B style business. I actually think that's potentially easier. So think about what it is that you can offer, how you want to position yourself, and what you're available for. Write that down, don't overthink it, and start letting people know. We have some very basic language for this for those in our job search community over in WorkWords. I actually took the template that I used when I went full-time in my business and rewrote it for folks to kind of fill in the blank with their own business and service ideas. The other thing that I would do if I were starting this over from, I do this, but definitely I would have done it sooner, is make sure that I have a lot of peers, like I'm building that ecosystem along with it. So if I'm writing resumes for people and I'm doing some job search related consulting and coaching, maybe it would be good for me to have some peers who are doing career exploration work more specifically, or peers who are leadership coaches, so that I can refer clients to other experts based on their needs. And in turn, receive referrals from folks who don't write resumes, are in other parts of the career development world. So I think that ecosystem building, which if you've listened for a while, you know is very, very important. That's what I would focus on. I would try to be in those communities, gathering those relationships, shoring up some connections and referrals, and maybe people who would subcontract to you, depending on the nature of the work. What you don't need to do, unless you really want to, unless this is important to you, is do a whole hard launch. I think a soft launch is fine. Any kind of launch is fine. And you want to be getting out there. You want to be letting people know what you're available for. You want to be having conversations with people in your line of work. That's really, really important because the internet will not just find you. I mean, that would be a lot of luck and Godspeed, but you really have to drive traffic to your LinkedIn page, to your website, whatever you're doing. And I will say, I think your LinkedIn page is completely fine for this. You do not need a website from the jump. It's okay if you have one. It's okay if you've been chipping away at that for years. Great. I really want to encourage people to lower the bar a little bit because you don't have to be perfect, especially for contract work. People are going to reach out and be in touch because people need that kind of labor right now. It's not that nothing's happening. It's that it's just not happening at the scale that we're used to. So there's work to do. There's plenty of work for freelancers, but you are going to need a system to really figure that out. And until you do that for a few weeks or several months, you're going to need to experiment. We're just not going to know what works really, really well for you. There's no way to know that until you do that, unfortunately. Now, I am not a lawyer. I'm not an accountant. None of this is that kind of advice. But I do want to encourage you to think about accessing some of that support should it be helpful for the business structure you need to pursue. Take a look at what your city and state requires in terms of registration. Take a look at what the public library offers. There's often folks who will host office hours, lawyers, retired business executives. SCORE is a great organization if you're looking for some kind of business mentor. I've had a lot of friends and colleagues have good luck with their SCORE mentor. I can link to that as well in the show notes. You really want to put yourself out there just like a job seeker would. I often say to people that being self-employed is like job searching constantly. And it is for me because my work with people tends to be fairly short term. So I'm just always offboarding clients and onboarding new ones. It's like a rolling process around here. And some people work on much longer retainers and sometimes work with one client for their entire business relationship. I like to have multiple things going on. That's my whole vibe. If you can't tell from this episode, I like to do different things. You should think about what your strengths are. But really what I encourage people to think about is what's the easiest to do? Where can you get people to vouch for your skills and expertise most easily so that they'll refer people to you? That I think can make a really big difference. The other thing I'll say is that you can put this work on your resume, and you probably should. I have been thinking about gaps in employment. And if you've heard me talk about gaps in the last decade, and I'm sure many of you have, I'm generally not in the business of trying to obscure gaps because I think it's impossible to really have a career and a life without some kind of gap there. And I think people can get hired with gaps, but we're watching gaps get longer and longer. And some people have multiple gaps in the last 5 years. One of the reasons to pull this lever, or these levers, I guess I should say, is that it will allow you to own that narrative a little bit more, with a little bit more autonomy, right? You're waiting for a job. You don't have to wait for a job. Create a business container, create some kind of container vehicle for yourself and your work, and put that on there. Okay, so you're giving yourself credit for the work that you're doing, including building a business, which is, I would argue, the hardest part of having a business is getting it started and off the ground. Another warning here is that this can be way more fun than job searching. I've seen this play out time and time again, where it's just more fun to build something than to job search. Now, you get to decide how you spend your time. Maybe it's okay to go all in on your business, but just pay attention to that because what I'm not suggesting is that you need to do this own a business, side hustle, contract, instead of look for a full-time job. You might decide that, but really what I'm saying is here's an alternative to applying for jobs constantly. Consider getting a job locally. Consider starting something for yourself in a part-time capacity. I just think for a lot of people, having something to do, having some structure is infinitely useful. It's generative, it's exciting, it gives you something to talk about other than looking for a job. I would encourage you to really spend some time looking at how to create an ecosystem, not just for your job search, but for your income, really untangling income from your job. Something that's been really interesting for me. So let me say this. I'm in the process of actually really simplifying my services for the fall. So in September, we're going to have a different set of ways to work privately in our one-on-one services. I almost got rid of one of our services called Career Alchemy, which is our most robust, most expensive, longest job search service, because it's the container that is really about building something too, right? It's not just about job searching per se, but it was really designed for people who wanted to also create a side hustle or some kind of consulting or do a 180 kind of change and needed more time than the job search services. And I almost got rid of it because I thought, I'm not sure this is the right market for this kind of service. It's actually been my most popular one-on-one service this year, because people are coming and they want to know more than how to land a job. They want to know, how do I get my first client? How do I let people know I'm job searching and looking for clients or available for work in this way? How do I maximize this? Also, how do I not work twice as hard trying to do both of these things? So if you are thinking about things outside of the 9 to 5, you are in very good company. And while longtime listeners will know I don't like making predictions, one thing I do think is worth learning is how to earn an income without a job. Because I think jobs are going to be real up and down for the next foreseeable future, quite frankly. And again, that's not to say nobody's getting jobs, because I don't feel that way at all. I actually feel like it was a pretty good summer for a lot of folks I was working with, to be honest. However, the market's not the same across all industries. We got another over 3 years of this administration left. Hopefully that's it. I think we're just going to need to learn to be flexible. And I would want people to know how to do that ahead of time, how to really promote yourself and take ownership over your income so that you're not dependent on a job market that's likely to be very unpredictable. All right. I am going to have some activities at our Revive Your Job Search workshop happening on September 30th for folks who want to sort of open this other channel, right? So not just in the job market, job search traditional sense, but there's something else that could be created for you. There's some other vehicle or container for your work that could be created or imagined. So if this is of interest to you, I hope that you will consider joining us on September 30th for Revive Your Job Search. I'm using the term job search because I'm being very generic. I'm going to be as imaginative as possible about what this could look like for people. So please come and join us. And if you haven't already watched or listened to How to Job Search at the End of the World, make sure you get that for free, because that could help you be much more efficient in your traditional job search if you have one of those going. And that's what we want. My goal is not to have people spending 40 hours a week in their job search. I know you have more important things to do. I want to help you do them. So check out that workshop. It's for free until September 25th. The discount code is in the show notes. And of course, if you have any questions, please find me on LinkedIn. That is the platform I am on most regularly. So I'd love to hear from you if you have any thoughts or questions at all. Thank you so much for listening. I'm really glad to be back. I'm excited for our next episode, which is going to be about making a pivot at the end of the world, a career pivot for the end of the world. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, I hope you have a really great couple of weeks. Take good care.